Hi, everyone. How's it going? I hope everybody's had a good Friday. It's the weekend for whatever, that means to us right now. We'll see, won't we? But I'm here and I'm back with some more Dune, which I hope everybody out there is enjoying. Like I said, I know I certainly am. I've noticed that I have people who keep coming back, so that's nice to see. That's pretty heartening. Like I said, I'm earlier again tonight because I have something going on again tonight. But I think tomorrow we might be back at normal time, but we'll see. I'm not sure yet. Um, as for what we're going to be doing, let's hop straight into it. It's going to be two chapters tonight because we've one of them is going to be pretty short, but we've run across the situation again where the following chapter is going to be pretty long, and in keeping with my arbitrary length requirements, I'm going to try and keep them, within a certain time frame. So, without further ado, what say we hop right into it, shall we? Where we last left off, Jessica kind of screamed at Thufir about the fact that he suspected her of being the traitor. It didn't do much to assuage his suspicions, of course, but it did make him fear Jessica a little bit because she showed off her Bene Gesserit abilities, and that is a great concern to him. And also, Dr. Yueh has made his move to betray the Duke. He has hit the Duke with a powerful tranquilizer, and he's bringing him to the Baron Harkonnen. But he's explained to him that he has an ace in the hole to try and take the Baron out. So, let's see what happens, shall we? We are starting with Chapter 17 tonight. There should be a science of discontent. People need hard times and oppression to develop psychic muscles. From Collected Sayings of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. Jessica awoke in the dark, feeling premonition in the stillness around her. She could not understand why her mind and body felt so sluggish. Skin raspings of fear ran along her nerves. She thought of sitting up and turning on a light, but something stayed the decision. Her mouth felt strange. Lump, 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 lump. It was a dull sound, directionless in the dark. Somewhere. The waiting moment was packed with time, with rustling needlestick movements. She began to feel her body, grew aware of bindings on wrists and ankles, a gag in her mouth. She was on her side, hands tied behind her. She tested the bindings, realized they were crimscale fiber, would only claw tighter as she pulled. And now she remembered. There had been movement in the darkness of her bedroom. Something wet and pungent slapped across her face, filling her mouth, hands grasping for her. She had gasped, one indrawn breath, sensing the narcotic in the wetness. Consciousness had receded, sinking her into a black bin of terror. It has come, she thought. How simple it was to subdue the Bene Gesserit. All it took was treachery. Hawat was right. She forced herself not to pull on her bindings. This is not my bedroom, she thought. They've taken me someplace else. Slowly she marshaled the inner calmness. She grew aware of the smell of her own stale sweat with its chemical infusion of fear. Where is Paul? She asked herself. My son. What have they done to him? Calmness. She forced herself to it, using the ancient routines. But terror remained so near. Leto. Where are you, Leto? She sensed a diminishing in the dark. It began with shadows. Dimensions separated, became new thorns of awareness. White, a line under a door. I'm on the floor. People walking. She sensed it through the floor. Jessica squeezed back the memory of terror. I must remain calm, alert, and prepared. I may only get one chance. Again she forced the inner calmness. The ungainly thumping of her heartbeats evened, shaping out time. She counted back. I was unconscious about an hour. She closed her eyes, focusing her awareness on the approaching footsteps. 4 people. She counted the differences in their steps. I must pretend I'm still unconscious. She relaxed against the cold floor, testing her body's readiness, heard a door open, sensed increased light through her eyelids. Feet approached. Someone standing over her.
You are awake, rumbled a basso voice. Do not pretend.
She opened her eyes. The Baron Vladimir Harkonnen stood over her. Around them she recognized the cellar room where Paul had slept, saw his cot at one side, empty. Dispenser lamps were brought in by guards, distributed near the open door. There was a glare of light in the hallway beyond that hurt her eyes. She looked up at the Baron. He wore a yellow cape that bulged over his portable suspensors. The fat cheeks were two cherubic mounds beneath spider-black eyes.
The drug was timed, he rumbled. We knew to the minute when you'd be coming out of it.
How could that be? She wondered. They'd have to know my exact weight, my metabolism, my... Yueh.
Such a pity you must remain gagged, the Baron said. We could have such an interesting conversation.
Yueh's the only one it could be, she thought. How? The Baron glanced behind him at the door.
Come in, Piter.
She had never before seen the man who entered to stand beside the Baron, but the face was known. And the man. Piter de Vries, the Mentat assassin. She studied him, hawk features, blue ink eyes that suggested he was a native of Arrakis, but subtleties of movement and stance told her he was not, and his flesh was too well firmed with water. He was tall, though slender, and something about him suggested effeminacy.
Such a pity we cannot have our conversation, my dear Lady Jessica, the Baron said. However, I am aware of your abilities.
He glanced at the Mentat.
Isn't that true, Piter?
As you say, Baron, the man said. The voice was tenor. It touched her spine with a wash of coldness. She had never heard such a chill voice. To one with the Bene Gesserit training, the voice screamed, Killer.
I have a surprise for Piter, the Baron said. He thinks he has come here to collect his reward, you, Lady Jessica. But I wish to demonstrate a thing, that he does not really want you.
You play with me, Baron, Piter asked, and he smiled. Seeing that smile, Jessica wondered that the Baron did not leap to defend himself from this Piter. Then she corrected herself. The Baron could not read that smile. He did not have the training.
In many ways, Piter is quite naive, the Baron said. He doesn't admit to himself what a deadly creature you are, Lady Jessica. I'd show him, but it'd be a foolish risk.
The Baron smiled at Piter, whose face had become a waiting mask.
I know what Piter really wants. Piter wants power.
You promised I could have her, Piter said. The tenor voice had lost some of its cold reserve. Jessica heard the clue tones in the man's voice, allowed herself an inward shudder. How could the Baron have made such an animal out of a Mentat?
I give you a choice, Piter,
the Baron said. What choice? The Baron snapped fat fingers.
The woman and exile from the Imperium, or the Duchy of Atreides on Arrakis, to rule as you see fit in my name.
Jessica watched the Baron's spider eyes study Piter.
You could be Duke here in all but name, the Baron said.
Is my Leto dead, then? Jessica asked herself. She felt a silent wail begin somewhere in her mind. The Baron kept his attention on the Mentat.
Understand yourself, Piter. You want her because she was a Duke's woman, a symbol of his power. Beautiful, useful, exquisitely trained for her role. But an entire duchy, Piter. That's more than a symbol. That's the reality. With it, you could have many women, and more.
You do not joke with Piter. The Baron turned with that dancing lightness the suspensors gave him.
Joke? I? Remember, I am giving up the boy. You heard what the traitor said about the lad's training. They are alike, this mother and son. Deadly.
The Baron smiled.
I must go now. I will send in the guard I've reserved for this moment. He's stone deaf. His orders will be to convey you on the first leg of your journey into exile. He will subdue this woman if he sees her gain control of you. He'll not permit you to untie her gag until you're off Arrakis. If you choose not to leave, he has other orders.
You don't have to leave, Piter said. I've chosen.
Ha! The Baron chortled. Such quick decision can mean only one thing.
I will take the ducky, Piter said. And Jessica thought, doesn't Piter know that the Baron's lying to him? But how could he know? He's a twisted mentat. The Baron glanced down at Jessica.
Is it not wonderful that I know Piter so well? I wagered with my master-at-arms that this would be Piter's choice. Well, I leave now. This is much better. Ah, much better. You understand, Lady Jessica, I had no rancor toward you. It's a necessity. Much better this way, yes. And I've not actually ordered you destroyed. When it's asked of me what happens to you, I can shrug it all off in truth.
You leave it to me, then? Piter asked.
The guard I send you will take your orders, the Baron said. Whatever's done, I leave to you.
He stared at Piter.
Yes, there will be no blood on my hands here. It's your decision. Yes, I know nothing of it. You will wait until I've gone before doing whatever you must do. Yes, well. Yes, good.
He fears the questioning of a truth-sayer, Jessica thought. Who? The Reverend Mother Gaius Helen, of course. If he knows he must face her questions, then the Emperor is in on this for sure. My poor Leto. With one last glance at Jessica, the Baron turned, went out the door. She followed him with her eyes, thinking, it's as the Reverend Mother warned, too potent an adversary. 2 Harkonnen troopers entered. Another, his face a scarred mask, followed and stood in the doorway with drawn laser gun. The deaf one, Jessica thought, studying the scarred face. The Baron knows I could use the voice on any other man. Scarface looked at Piter. Leave the boy on a litter outside. What are your orders? Piter spoke to Jessica. I thought of binding you by a threat held over your son, but I begin to see what that would not have worked. I let emotion cloud reason. Bad policy for a mentat. He looked at the first pair of troopers, turning so the deaf one could read his lips. Take them to the desert, as the traitor suggested for the boy. His plan is a good one. The worms will destroy all evidence. Their bodies must never be found. You don't wish to dispatch them yourself? Scarface asked. He reads lips, Jessica thought. I follow my Baron's example, Piter said. Take them where the traitor said. Jessica heard the harsh mentat control in Piter's voice, thought, he too fears the truth-sayer. Piter shrugged, turned, and went through the doorway. He hesitated there, and Jessica thought he might turn back for a last look at her. But he went out without turning. Me, I wouldn't like the thought of facing that truth-sayer after this night's work, Scarface said. You ain't likely ever to run into that old witch, one of the other troopers said. He went around to Jessica's head, bent over her. You ain't getting no work done standing around here chattering. Take a feet and... Why don't we kill him here? Scarface asked. Too messy, the first one said. Unless she wants to strangle him. Me, I likes a nice, straightforward job. Drop 'em on the desert, like that traitor said. Cut 'em up once or twice. Leave the evidence for the worms. Nothing to clean up afterwards. Yes, well, I guess you're right, Scarface said. Jessica listened to them, watching, registering. But the gag blocked her voice, and there was the deaf one to consider. Scarface holstered his laser gun, took her feet. They lifted her like a sack of grain, maneuvered her through the door, and dumped her into a suspensor-buoyed litter with another bound figure. As they turned her, fitting her to the litter, she saw her companion's face. Paul. He was bound, but not gagged. His face was no more than 10 centimeters from hers. Eyes closed, his breathing even. Is he drugged? She wondered. The troopers lifted the litter, and Paul's eyes opened the smallest fraction. Dark slits staring at her. He mustn't try the voice, she prayed. The deaf guard. Paul's eyes closed. He had been practicing the awareness breathing, calming his mind, listening to their captors. The deaf one posed a problem, but Paul contained his despair. The mind-calming Bene Gesserit regimen his mother had taught him kept him poised, ready to expand any opportunity. Paul allowed himself another slit-eyed inspection of his mother's face. She appeared unharmed, gagged though. He wondered who could have captured her. His own captivity was plain enough. To bed with a capsule prescribed by Yueh, awaking to find himself bound to this litter. Perhaps a similar thing had befallen her. Logic said the traitor was Yueh, but he held a final decision in abeyance. There was no understanding it. A Sook doctor, a traitor? The litter tipped slightly as the Harkonnen troopers maneuvered it through the doorway into starlit night. A suspensor buoy rasped against the doorway. Then they were on sand, feet grating in it. A thopter wing loomed overhead, blotting the stars. The litter settled to the ground. Paul's eyes adjusted to the faint light. He recognized the deaf trooper as the man who'd opened the thopter door, peered inside at the green gloom illuminated by the instrument panel. "This the thopter we're supposed to use?" he asked, and turned to watch his companion's lips. "It's the one the traitor said was fixed for desert work." Scarface nodded. "But it's one of them little liaison jobs. Ain't room for more'n them and two of us." "Two's enough," the litter-bearer said, moving up close and presenting his lips for reading. "We can take care of it from here on, Cadet." "The Baron, he told me to make sure what happened to them two," Scarface said. "What are you so worried about?" said another trooper from behind the litter-bearer. "She's a Bene Gesserit witch," the deaf one said. "They have powers." "Ah!" The litter-bearer made the sign with a fist at his ear. "One of them, eh? Know what you mean." The trooper behind him grunted. "She'll be worm meat soon enough. Don't suppose even a Bene Gesserit witch has powers over one of them big worms, eh, Chigo?" He nudged the litter-bearer. "Yep," the litter-bearer said. He returned to the litter, took Jessica's shoulders. "Go on, Kenneth. You can go along if you wants to make sure what happens." "It is nice of you to invite me, Chigo," Scarface said. Jessica felt herself lifted, the winged shadows spinning. Stars. She was pushed into the rear of the thopter, her crimp-scale fiber bindings examined, and she was strapped down. Paul was jammed in beside her, strapped securely, and she noted the bonds were simple rope. Scarface, the deaf one they called Kinnet, took his place in the front. The litter-bearer, the one they called Chigo, came around and took the other front seat. Kinnet closed his door, bent to the controls. The thopter took off in a wing-tucked surge, headed south over the shield wall. Chigo tapped his companion's shoulder, said, "Why don't you turn around and keep an eye on them two?" "Sure you know the way to go?" Kinnet watched Chigo's lips. "I listen to the traitor, same as you." Kinnet swiveled his seat. Jessica saw the glint of starlight on a laser gun in his hand. The thopter's light-walled interior seemed to collect illumination as her eyes adjusted, but the guard's scarred face remained dim. Jessica tested her seatbelt, found it loose. She felt roughness in the strap against her left arm, realized the strap had been almost severed, would snap at a sudden jerk. "Has someone been in this thopter, preparing it for us?" she wondered. "Who?" Slowly she twisted her bound feet clear of Paul's. "Sure do seem a shame to waste a good-looking woman like this," Scarface said. "You ever have any highborn types?" He turned to look at the pilot. "Bene Gesserit ain't all highborn," the pilot said. "But they looks all Heidi." "He can see me plain enough," Jessica thought. She brought her bound legs up to the seat, curled into a sinuous ball, staring at Scarface. "Real pretty she is," Kinnet said. He wet his lips with his tongue. "Sure do seem a shame." He looked at Chigo. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" the pilot asked. "Who'd be to know?" the guard asked. "Afterwards," he shrugged. "I just never had me no highborns. Might never get a chance like this one again." "You lay a hand on my mother," Paul grated. He glared at Scarface. "Hey!" the pilot laughed. "Cub's got a back! Ain't got no bite, though." And Jessica thought, Paul's pitching his voice too high. It may work, though. They flew on in silence. Those poor fools, Jessica thought, studying her guards and reviewing the Baron's words. They'll be killed as soon as they report success on their mission. The Baron wants no witnesses. The thopter banked over the southern rim of the shield wall, and Jessica saw a moon-shadowed expanse of sand beneath them. "This ought to be far enough," the pilot said. "The trader said to put him on the sand anywhere near the shield wall." He dipped the craft toward the dunes in a long, failing stoop, brought it up stiffly over the desert surface. Jessica saw Paul begin taking the rhythmic breaths of the calming exercise. He closed his eyes, opened them. Jessica stared, helpless to aid him. He hasn't mastered the voice yet, she thought. If he fails... The thopter touched sand with a soft lurch, and Jessica, looking north back across the shield wall, saw a shadow of wings settle out of sight up there. Someone's following us, she thought. Who? Then, the ones the Baron set to watch this pair. And there'll be watchers for the watchers, too. Chigo shut off his wing rotors. Silence flooded in upon them. Jessica turned her head. She could see the window beyond Scarface, a dim glow of light from a rising moon, a frosted rim of rock rising from the desert. Sandblast ridges streaked its sides. Paul cleared his throat. The pilot said, "Now, Kinnett." "I don't know, Chigo." Chigo turned, said, "Look." He reached out for Jessica's skirt. "Remove her gag," Paul commanded. Jessica felt the words rolling in the air. The tone, the timbre, excellent. Imperative, very sharp. A slightly lower pitch would have been better, but it could still fall within this man's spectrum. Chigo shifted his hand up to the band around Jessica's mouth, slipped the knot on the gag. "Stop that!" Kinnett ordered. Shut your trap," Chigo said. "The hands are tied." He freed the knot, and the binding dropped. His eyes glittered as he studied Jessica. Kinnett put a hand on the pilot's arm. "Look, Chigo, no need to..." Jessica twisted her neck, spat out the gag. She pitched her voice in low, intimate tones. "Gentlemen, no need to fight over me." At the same time, she writhed sinuously for Kinnett's benefit. She saw them grow tense, knowing that in this instant they were convinced of the need to fight over her. Their disagreement required no other reason. In their minds, they were fighting over her. She held her face high in the instrument glow, to be sure Kinnett would read her lips, said, "You mustn't disagree." They drew farther apart, glanced warily at each other. "Is any woman worth fighting over?" she asked. By uttering the words, by being there, she made herself infinitely worth their fighting. Paul clamped his lips tightly closed, forced himself to be silent. There had been the one chance for him to succeed with the voice. Now, everything depended on his mother, whose experience went so far beyond his own. "Yeah," Scarface said. "No need to fight over..." His hand flashed toward the pilot's neck. The blow was met by a splash of metal that caught the arm and in the same motion slammed into Kinnett's chest. Scarface groaned, sagged backward against his door. "Thought I was some dummy, didn't know that trick," Chigo said. He brought back his hand, revealing the knife. It glittered in reflected moonlight. "Now for the cub," he said, and leaned toward Paul. "No need for that," Jessica murmured. Chigo hesitated. "Wouldn't you rather have me cooperative?" Jessica asked. "Give the boy a chance." Her lip curled in a sneer. "Little enough chance he'd have out there in that sand. Give him that, and..." She smiled. "You could find yourself well rewarded." Chigo glanced left, right, turned his attention to Jessica. "I've heard me what can happen to a man in this desert," he said. "Boy may find the knife a kindness." "Is it so much I ask?" Jessica pleaded. "You're trying to trick me," Chigo muttered. "I don't want to see my son die," Jessica said. "Is that a trick?" Chigo moved back, elbowed the door latch. He grabbed Paul, dragged him across the seat, pushed him half out the door, and held the knife posed. "What'll you do, cub, if I cut your bonds?" "He'll leave here immediately and head for those rocks," Jessica said. "Is that what you'll do, cub?" Chigo asked. Paul's voice was properly surly. "Yes." The knife moved down, slashed the bindings of his legs. Paul felt the hand to his back to hurl him down into the sand, feigned a lurch against the doorframe for purchase, turned as though to catch himself, lashed out with his right foot. The toe was aimed with a precision that did credit to his long years of training, as though all of that training focused on this instant. Almost every muscle of his body cooperated in the placement of it. The tip struck the soft part of Chigo's abdomen just below the sternum, slammed upward with terrible force over the liver and through the diaphragm to crush the right ventricle of the man's heart. With one gurgling scream, the guard jerked backward across the seats. Paul, unable to use his hands, continued his tumble onto the sand, landing with a roll that took up the force and brought him back to his feet in one motion. He dove back into the cabin, found the knife, and held it in his teeth while his mother sawed her bonds. She took the blade and freed his hands. "I could have handled him," she said. "He'd have had to cut my bindings. That was a foolish risk." "I saw the opening and used it," he said. She heard the harsh control in his voice, said, "Yueh's house sign is scrawled on the ceiling of his cabin." She looked out, saw the curling symbol. "Get out and let us study this craft," she said. "There's a bundle under the pilot's seat. I felt it when we got there." "Bomb?" "Doubt it. There's something peculiar here." Paul leaped out to the sand, and Jessica followed. She turned, reached under the seat for the strange bundle, seeing Chigo's feet close to her face, feeling dampness on the bundle as she removed it, realizing the dampness was the pilot's blood. Waste of moisture, she thought, knowing that this was Arakeen thinking. Paul stared around them, saw the rock scarp lifting out of the desert like a beach rising from the sea, wind-carved palisades beyond. He turned back as his mother lifted the bundle from the thopter, saw her stare across the dunes toward the shield wall. He looked to see what drew her attention, saw another thopter swooping toward them, realized they'd not have time to clear the bodies out of this thopter and escape. "Run, Paul!" Jessica shouted. "It's Harkonnens!" And that's the end of our first chapter, so here's our second one for tonight. Arrakis teaches the attitude of the knife, chopping off what's incomplete and saying, "Now it's complete because it's ended here." From Collected Sayings of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. A man in Harkonnen uniform skidded to a stop at the end of the hall, stared in at Yueh, taking in a single glance at Mape's body. The sprawled form of the Duke, Yueh standing there. The man held a laser gun in his right hand. There was a casual air of brutality about him, a sense of toughness and poise that sent a shiver through Yueh. Sardaukar, Yueh thought. A Bashar by the look of him. Probably one of the Emperor's own, sent here to keep an eye on things. No matter what the uniform, there's no disguising them. "You're Yueh," the man said. He looked speculatively at the Sook School ring on the doctor's hair, stared once at the diamond tattoo, and then met Yueh's eyes. "I am Yueh," the doctor said. "You can relax, Yueh," the man said. "When you dropped the house shields, we came right in. Everything's under control here. Is this the Duke?" "This is the Duke." "Dead?" "Merely unconscious. I suggest you tie him." "Did you do for these others?" He glanced back down the hall where Mape's body lay. "More's the pity," Yueh muttered. "Pity?" The Sardaukar sneered. He advanced, looking down at Leto. "So that's the great Red Duke." "If I had doubts about what this man is, that would end them," Yueh thought. "Only the Emperor calls the Atreides the Red Dukes." The Sardaukar reached down, cut the Red Hawk insignia from Leto's uniform. "Little souvenir," he said. "Where's the ducal signet ring?" "He doesn't have it on him," Yueh said. "I can see that," the Sardaukar snapped. Yueh stiffened, swallowed. "If they press me, bring in a truth-sayer, they'll find out about the ring, about the thopter I prepared. All will fail." "Sometimes the Duke sent the ring with a messenger as surety that an order came directly from him," Yueh said. "Must be damn trusted messengers," the Sardaukar muttered. "Aren't you going to tie him?" Yueh ventured. "How long will he be unconscious?" 2 hours or so. I wasn't as precise with his dosage as I was for the woman and boy." The Sardaukar spurned the Duke with his toe. "This was nothing to fear even when awake. When will the woman and boy awaken?" "About 10 minutes." "So soon?" "I was told the Baron would arrive immediately behind his men." "So he will. You'll wait outside, Yueh." He shot a hard glance at Yueh. "Now!" Yueh glanced at Leto. "But what about—"
They'll be delivered to the Baron all properly trussed like a roast for the oven.
Again, the Sardaukar looked at the diamond tattoo on Yueh's forehead.
You're known. You'll be safe enough in the halls. We've no more time for chit-chat, traitor. I hear the others coming.
Traitor, Yueh thought. He lowered his gaze, pressed past the Sardaukar, knowing this is a foretaste of how history would remember him. Yueh the traitor. He passed more bodies on his way to the front entrance and glanced at them, fearful that one might be Paul or Jessica. All were house troopers or wore Harkonnen uniform. Harkonnen guards came alert, staring at him as he emerged from the front entrance into flame-lighted night. The palms along the road had been fired to illuminate the house. Black smoke from the flammables used to ignite the trees poured upward through orange flames. It's the traitor, someone said.
The Baron will want to see you soon, another said.
I must get to the Thopter, Yueh thought. I must put the ducal signet where Paul will find it. And fear struck him. If Idaho suspects me or grows impatient, if he doesn't wait and go exactly where I told him, Jessica and Paul will not be saved from the carnage. I'll be denied even the smallest relief from my act. The Harkonnen guard released his arm, said,
Wait over there out of the way.
Abruptly, Yueh saw himself as castaway in this place of destruction, spared nothing, not even the smallest pity. Idaho must not fail. Another guard bumped into him, barked, Stay out of the way, you! Even when they've profited by me, they despise me, Yueh thought. He straightened himself as he was pushed aside, regained some of his dignity.
Wait for the Baron,
a guard officer snarled. Yueh nodded, walked with controlled casualness along the front of the house, turned the corner into shadows out of sight of the burning palms. Quickly, every step betraying his anxiety, Yueh made for the rear yard beneath the conservatory where the Thopter waited, the craft they had placed there to carry away Paul and his mother. A guard stood at the open rear door of the house, his attention focused on the lighted hall and men banging through there, searching from room to room. How confident they were. Yueh hugged the shadows, worked his way around the Thopter, eased open the door on the side away from the guard. He felt under the front seats for the friend kit he had hidden there, lifted a flap, and slipped in the ducal signet. He felt the crinkling of the spice paper there, the note he had written, pressed the ring into the paper. He removed his hand, resealed the pack. Softly, Yueh closed the Thopter door, worked his way back to the corner of the house and around the flaming trees. Now it is done, he thought. Once more, he emerged into the light of the blazing palms. He pulled his cloak around him, stared at the flames. Soon I will know. Soon I will see the Baron, and I will know. The Baron, he will encounter a small tooth. And there we go. That's it for us tonight. Like I said, it was a shorter section than usual, but tomorrow's probably going to be a longer one than usual, so I guess it all balances out. So, I hope you all enjoyed and are staying safe out there. It's still very important, and that's part of why I'm doing this, to make sure that you people have something to do while they're inside. So, I will be back tomorrow with more, and I hope everybody has a nice night tonight. All right? All right. Bye-bye, everyone.